South Africa's special COVID-19 budget was delivered by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni in Parliament on Wednesday. A grim picture of South Africa's economy was outlined as the minister confirmed a rise in debt levels and a widening budget deficit. Once approved by the legislature, the national budget authorizes the government to raise revenues, incur debts and effect expenditure to achieve certain objectives. Now, Rekgotsofetse Chikane, lecturer at Wits School of Governance, joins us via Skype to unpack further. Thank you for joining us, my brother. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Now, what do you make of the plans put in place to save this economy on the back of what the finance minister said a few days ago?
I mean, it's interesting watching the finance minister speak, right? We are essentially in a sinking ship, and he's aware of it. He feels that his crew is aware of it, but it almost seems like no one's willing to really plug up the holes in a very serious manner. And we had to go through this COVID-19 pandemic crisis, right, to really make it starkly aware that our economy is completely messed up, right, completely topsy-turvy, if I had to use that phrase, right? So the minister's attempt was no longer trying to plug holes, right, anymore. The minister's attempt now was, how do we manage the life rafts? Right, we're now talking about what type of life rafts do we need. We're not talking about the type of loans that we want to get from the international financial institutions, right? We're talking about the type of debt to GDP rate that we have. That is a life raft type of level of GDP. The fact that 20% of our budget is simply going back to paying interest on our debt speaks volumes. So when you look at the state of the country right now, I think what the minister was trying to say was, you know, at some point in our lives, within the next 5 years, we need to make a decision as a country about how we want to go about future growth, because the way we've run the country for the past 10 years is the essential situation of racking up debt and then losing your job, but still keeping the lifestyle that you have. And I think these type of changes that he's proposing will move us in the right direction.
Do you think he got the support that he needed from his colleagues at the ANC? And do you think there was a discussion about all of this before he tabled the budget on Wednesday?
Yeah. So on the surface level, it seems as if he did get the support, right? But on the surface level, all politics during this time period has to be taken with a bit of grain of salt, right? It would be extremely unpopular right now for any politician to try and attack the ruling party. As many of the opposition parties have found, they're polling extremely well. The confidence levels in them, except for certain issues, is extremely high, right? So no person within the party would really come out strongly against them. The real question is when you come moving from the supplementary budget back into the main budget next year, and if you're incapable of implementing, so let's say SARS, for instance, is incapable of collecting taxes at the rate that they think they'll collect taxes, right? So we've had a 300 billion rand deficit, right? Then you will be opened up to attack again, right? So I think the knives are not out for him yet, but it doesn't mean they've been tucked away. So we'll see how the implementation of the supplementary budget rolls out, and we'll see that in the next 3 months, whether he gets the requisite support from government ministries, from departments, from different legislatures.
Now, with debt expected to hit 4 trillion rand this year alone, do you think bankruptcy is inevitable for South Africa's economy?
Yeah, so it was very interesting listening to the supplementary budget, as well as a speech that the Reserve Bank governor gave actually at the Wits School of Governance last week, and looking at those two together, and both warnings were quite grave, right? Both warnings were essentially saying that we are quickly running into a debt trap. Right. And not to say that they were coordinated in their messaging. These are two very different institutions having two very equal recommendations to say that we have to change things. Right. But we can't keep spending money. Right. So we can't do a tactic such as quantitative easing to ease monetary policy. Right. We can't simply expand the fiscus. Right. So one of the things that disappointed me from the budget is the government's attempt to put more money into public infrastructure, right, as well as redirect job creation money, which is, I think, is 100 billion rand, into public infrastructure job creation. Well, we've now figured out that that doesn't work, right? South Africa's been trying to create jobs through infrastructure for the past 15 years, and unemployment has not budged at all. GDP increases per year is maintained at 0%, right, or 0 to 1%, right? So we need to think carefully about the tactics that we have. Otherwise, we'll be getting into this essentially this debt trap. And both institutions are warning against this.
21.5 billion rand specifically for COVID-19 relief and help to get testing kits, etc. Do you think that is enough money to help us tackle this pandemic?
When you talk about budgets, enough money is really quite relative, right? So I know some of the money is coming from the Solidarity Fund, right, to pay for PPE equipment, right? And then 21 billion is going into the healthcare sector. I mean, going into the COVID grants as a top-up. Now, the problem about the COVID grants, and we kind of found this out at the beginning of this pandemic, right, is that we have figured out that South Africa is really not equipped to fund the people who need the funding, right? So there's no money going to people who are in the informal sector, right? So people who are going to get grants are going to get grants either way, right? And they're going to struggle, and you're doing a top-up, and that's good. But these individuals who are not getting grants but are also not formally employed, and they're completely lost, and the government has no idea of how to get hold of them. These are millions of individuals who are the lifeblood of our economy as well, right? These are the informal tradesmen at taxi ranks. These are the informal traders who will sell at a corner street, right? This is the lifeblood of our economy in one way or another. And the 21 billion doesn't go to them. Right, so this is really not a stimulus package in any particular way. It's another life raft type of intervention. And we do need to make that clear distinction, right, about the type of money that the government invests, whether it creates growth or whether it just keeps us afloat. And those are two very different contexts. And I don't think the government is trying to create growth here. I think they're just trying to keep our heads above water.
Do you think the finance minister strategically stayed away from saying anything about SAA?
Yeah, I think SAA is going through their going through their struggles as usual, right? And if I'm not mistaken, the plan hasn't come out yet about how you recapitalize SAA and how you restructure it completely from get the name of the debt auditors, for lack of a better phrase, right? So I think he did want to stay away from that. I think he stayed away from SOEs in general, with brief mentions around, how you save Eskom to an extent and the investment they're going to make into the land bank. I think right now is not the time for SOEs. I think right now SOEs are in a really good position where the limelight isn't on them, right? And they can really do some interesting work going forward. So an SOE such as Transnet with its new CEO, right, is in a prime position to really restructure its finances without the media gaze on them, without their operations firing at full. Right, so the SOEs have this interesting window of opportunity to really capitalize on this pandemic and reorganize their finances, reorganize their operations. When it comes to SAA, I think we have to wait for the recommendations to come out. We need to see more cooperation between National Treasury and the debt consultants, the restructuring consultants.
Okay, let's chat October now. Can we expect a more detailed and assertive medium-term policy from the finance minister? I'm thinking things will be better in October.
So things definitely won't be better in October. Come October, we will have a much clearer idea around the state of our economy. So one glaring thing that the minister didn't talk about, and no one's kind of talked about in government, because no one really has an idea, is the level of unemployment that will be the result of this pandemic, right? After Q1, we realized that our unemployment has reached, I think, almost 30% now. But it's not just that formal number, that narrow number is a good number to focus on. But in the context of the pandemic, it's the broad figure that we're looking at, right? And whether that broad figure will really go over that 40% mark, right? If you hit that mark, regardless of the type of budget that you want to put in place, it is almost essentially that almost half your country isn't functioning, isn't working, right? So I don't expect a huge medium-term budget in October. I think we'll see more of the same that we have now because the crisis won't be alleviated by then. And when I say the crisis won't be alleviated, I mean the consequences of the crisis will only truly be felt in 2 months' time.
Rekgotsofetse Chikane, thank you so much for your time. That's Rekgotsofetse Chikane, lecturer at Wits School of Governance, chatting to us about the post-supplementary budget analysis and its reception from opposition parties, business practitioners, as well as ratings agencies.